Case 1. Jessica Marie Mauthe, Armstrong County, Pennsylvania. On a quiet Saturday morning, September 13, 2025, the silence in Cadogan Township, Pennsylvania, broke when a landlord walked into a small white house on Oak Avenue to clean it after an eviction. Inside, the air was heavy with decay. When he followed the smell to a bedroom closet, he found a sealed bag, and inside it, the tiny, decomposed remains of what appeared to be an infant. Shaken and trembling, he called 911. When state police arrived, what they found turned a forgotten rental into a crime scene that would shock the nation. 3 more infant remains were discovered in the attic, each wrapped in towels, hidden in plastic and tote bags. For investigators, it was immediately clear this had not happened once, but again and again across years. The woman who lived there was 39-year-old Jessica Marie Mauthe. To her neighbors, she was quiet, polite, and ordinary, someone who smiled faintly, kept to herself, and raised 2 young boys. No one saw her pregnant. No one noticed anything unusual. Behind the walls of that small home, Jessica delivered multiple infants in secret. Police later confirmed she gave birth alone, one roughly a year earlier, another about 6 years ago, and each time the child never left the house alive. Forensic pathologists and the Indiana County Coroner's team began examining the remains, trying to determine how long each baby had lived and when each birth had taken place. The scientific evidence would help prosecutors decide whether these were stillbirths or intentional homicides. According to court filings, Jessica admitted to giving birth at home, but could not or would not explain why she hid the babies. She told investigators that one infant was wrapped in a towel until it stopped making noise. Detectives combed through her home, gathering evidence, DNA samples, blankets, and handwritten notes to build a timeline stretching across several years. They requested her medical records to see if any of these pregnancies were ever reported or treated. Not one was. It appeared that for more than half a decade, she concealed her pregnancies entirely from family, doctors, and neighbors. On September 15, 2025, state police filed their first round of charges: criminal homicide, involuntary manslaughter, concealment of the death of a child, and abuse of a corpse. Within days, as the 4th infant was confirmed, more charges followed. Jessica was arrested and denied bail. Court documents list the location of the discovery as 139 Oak Avenue. She now awaits trial at the Armstrong County Jail. A preliminary hearing has been scheduled, though no trial date has yet been set. Prosecutors are waiting for DNA results to determine if all 4 infants were hers and to establish whether any of them were born alive. Neighbors still can't make sense of it. Many said they never saw Jessica visibly pregnant, and some recalled seeing her children play outside just weeks before the discovery, never suspecting what was hidden inside their home. One neighbor told reporters, "You think you know people, but you never really do." The shock rippled through the small community, a town of fewer than 400 people, now known for something they wish they could forget. The case brought back haunting echoes of other Pennsylvania tragedies, cases where infants died because no one saw the warning signs of severe isolation and untreated mental illness. Experts who reviewed the affidavit described the case as a profound example of concealed childbirth, a condition often rooted in shame, fear, and deep psychological conflict. Concealed pregnancies can occur in women experiencing denial, psychosis, or trauma. Yet even in those cases, the law does not excuse the outcome. Every birth, attended or not, comes with a duty to preserve life. The justice system will have to decide whether Mauthe's actions were calculated crimes or the result of years of untreated breakdown. But whatever the verdict, the babies found in that house represent something larger, a collapse of connection between one woman and every system meant to protect her and her children. Today, Jessica Marie Mauthe remains behind bars, awaiting trial. The Armstrong County District Attorney's Office continues to coordinate forensic testing, and Pennsylvania State Police are still gathering evidence. The community of Cadogan, meanwhile, holds quiet vigils and conversations about how such a horror could go unnoticed for so long. Why did no one see the pregnancies? Why didn't the medical system detect multiple full-term births without follow-up care? These are questions investigators and child protection advocates now wrestle with. For those who study filicide, this case is an urgent reminder that mental illness, secrecy, and stigma can turn silence into a weapon. Concealed pregnancy is not rare, but it is often hidden behind embarrassment, cultural pressure, and fear of judgment. When those emotions fester in isolation, they can become fatal. Awareness and compassion are not luxuries. They are prevention. To every mother watching this, if you are overwhelmed, terrified, or unsure how to cope, there is help. Reach out to a doctor, counselor, or crisis line, and to every friend, neighbor, and family member, ask questions when something feels off. Listen without judgment. The cost of silence is too high. 4 tiny lives ended because no one knew they existed. In Cadogan Township, the air may have cleared, but the echoes of that discovery remain, reminding us that awareness saves lives and that indifference can kill just as surely as violence. Case 2. Kourtney Eutsey, Fayette County, charge 2025. The search for 9-year-old Renesmee Eutsey began as a missing child alert and ended as one of the most heartbreaking crimes Pennsylvania has seen in years. On the night of September 3rd, 2025, police in Fayette County were called after reports that the little girl had vanished from her foster home. Her foster mother, Kourtney Melinda Eutsey, told authorities that Renesmee had run off, maybe toward the woods, maybe by the river. Volunteers and neighbors joined the frantic search that stretched into the next day. Then, at dawn, on September 4th, the Yoyogeni River gave up its secret. Floating near the banks, wrapped inside a dark plastic bag, was the small body of the little girl they were all looking for. Renesmee had been in Kourtney Eutsey's care for several years, along with 3 of her siblings. To outsiders, the home looked normal, modest, quiet, unremarkable. But behind those walls, police would later discover a cycle of neglect and abuse that had gone unnoticed for too long. When investigators examined Renesmee's body, they found signs no child should ever bear. Bruises, signs of malnourishment, and what appeared to be burns. According to the criminal complaint, one of the surviving children told police, "I'm never going to see my baby sister again because she's in heaven." That same child claimed they overheard Kourtney and another adult planning to take Renesmee somewhere far away, and that she later heard her sister's screams before silence filled the house. During questioning, Kourtney gave shifting explanations. At first, she said Renesmee had fallen ill, that she was vomiting and choking. She panicked and tried CPR for 20 minutes. But investigators found inconsistencies in her story. If she had tried to save the child, why not call 911? Why hide the body instead of asking for help? Kourtney eventually admitted she feared authorities would see the bruises and burns and realize the level of abuse that had taken place. Police believe that after Renesmee's death, Kourtney placed her in a trash bag, drove to the riverbank, and left her there under cover of night. When the truth came out, the community of Smithfield Township fell into disbelief. Kourtney had been approved as a foster mother by county services, someone entrusted to protect children who had already been failed by others. Yet the system meant to safeguard them had missed every warning sign. Officials confirmed that all of Renesmee's siblings were immediately removed from the home and taken for medical evaluation. One was found to be dangerously malnourished, their ribs visible, their eyes sunken from neglect. These revelations deepened the outrage, not only toward Kourtney, but toward the agencies responsible for monitoring her home. Prosecutors charged Kourtney Melinda Eutsey with criminal homicide, aggravated assault, endangering the welfare of children, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, and concealment of the death of a child. She remains held without bail at the Fayette County Prison, awaiting trial. In court documents, she appeared emotionless, at times confused. As prosecutors described how she betrayed the sacred duty of care she had sworn to uphold. For a foster parent, this wasn't only a crime, it was a complete inversion of purpose. The home meant to be a refuge became a place of fear. Experts studying the case have drawn attention to the psychological breakdowns often seen in cases of prolonged caregiver stress and personality disintegration. In some instances, neglect escalates into what psychologists call displacement abuse, when a caregiver projects internal frustration, guilt, or resentment onto a child viewed as burdensome or symbolic of failure. Yet, as one forensic psychiatrist explained, stress and trauma may explain behavior, but they never excuse it. Every adult has the obligation to walk away before crossing the line of harm. Kourtney's silence since her arrest leaves many unanswered questions. What triggered the final act? What she thought as she stood by the river? But the facts already tell a devastating story of abandonment and silence. Renesmee's death has reignited outrage over Pennsylvania's foster care system, which has faced years of scrutiny for missed home visits and inadequate follow-up on abuse reports. Lawmakers and advocates are once again demanding reforms, asking how many more children have to die before oversight becomes action. Behind every policy failure is a real name, a real face, and a life that never had the chance to grow. Renesmee Eutsey was that child, a little girl with soft curls, a shy smile, and a future that should have been filled with promise. As her small casket was lowered into the earth, community members stood together in silence, some holding signs that read, "No more forgotten children." The tragedy of Renesmee's death is a reminder that evil often hides behind familiarity, that abuse doesn't always look like violence. It can look like neglect, indifference, or quiet cruelty. And for every foster child in Pennsylvania and beyond, her story must be a warning. Oversight cannot end at placement. Care must mean protection. Renesmee's name deserves more than a headline. It deserves to stand for change. If this story teaches anything, it's that child protection doesn't end when a file is closed. It begins when someone dares to ask questions, to report what doesn't feel right, and to believe that every small voice matters. Because silence, more than anything, is what failed Renesmee. Case 3. Ruth DiRienzo-Whitehead, Montgomery County, crime 2023, convicted 2024. It was just past midnight in Horsham Township, Pennsylvania, when 11-year-old Matthew Whitehead fell asleep beside his mother, unaware that the person he trusted most would soon take his life. On the morning of April 10th, 2023, police were called to the family's quiet suburban home after Matthew's father woke to find the master bedroom locked and the family SUV missing. He broke through the door and found his son lifeless in bed, a belt still nearby. The innocence of an ordinary night had vanished, replaced by the unimaginable sight of a mother's betrayal. Investigators later confirmed that Ruth DiRienzo-Whitehead, Matthew's 51-year-old mother, had strangled her son as he slept. Forensic pathologists determined the cause of death was ligature strangulation. Marks on his neck, hemorrhaging in his eyes, and swelling on his face left no question about what had happened. Within hours of the discovery, police tracked the missing SUV across state lines to Cape May, New Jersey. There, officers found it partially submerged on a beach, its doors unlocked and engine off. The belt used to kill Matthew was found inside. Footprints led from the vehicle into the sand dunes, where Ruth was found walking alone. In the hours that followed, she confessed. Ruth told investigators that financial pressures had been suffocating her family, that she felt like she had failed everyone. She said she couldn't bear the thought of her son facing a future of struggle or disappointment. Her words revealed a dark, psychological spiral common in cases of altruistic filicide, a delusional belief that a child is better off dead than alive to face perceived suffering. Experts describe this as a catastrophic collapse of maternal reasoning, a moment where despair transforms love into destruction. It's an act born not from hatred, but from hopelessness twisted beyond recognition. But the law does not measure motive through emotion. It measures through choice. And Ruth made hers. As investigators combed through her digital history, they found searches about strangulation, parental guilt, and suicide. Prosecutors argued that the killing was not a moment of breakdown, it was premeditated. Ruth had waited until her husband was asleep. She entered Matthew's room, placed a belt around his neck, and strangled him till he stopped breathing. Then she drove through the night toward the ocean where she planned to end her own life. Police found her before the tide did. When the case went to trial in early 2024, prosecutors portrayed Ruth as a mother who crossed the line between protection and possession. Defense attorneys painted her as a woman crushed by mental illness and emotional collapse, but the evidence spoke clearly. Matthew had been healthy, happy, and unaware of any danger. There was no sign of abuse, no sign of neglect, only a single act that erased everything he could have become. The court found Ruth DiRienzo-Whitehead guilty of first-degree murder and possession of an instrument of crime. In February 2024, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. During sentencing, she wept and apologized, calling her actions unforgivable. The judge told her that Matthew's last moments would forever define her legacy. You took the life you were meant to protect. In Horsham, Matthew's death left a scar across a community that had always seen the Whiteheads as stable, educated, and loving. Teachers described him as bright and curious, a boy who loved science and video games, who made friends easily and always offered to help others. His classmates released blue balloons in his memory, the color of his favorite hoodie, and his school held a memorial in the gymnasium where he once played basketball. This case shook parents far beyond Pennsylvania because it touched a terrifying truth that mental illness, untreated depression, and crushing financial stress can grow quietly behind polished doors. Ruth's story is not a defense. It's a warning. Psychologists stress that no economic hardship or emotional pain can justify harming a child, and yet every year, cases like this repeat. The difference between a breakdown and a murder often lies in whether someone recognizes the warning signs in time. Today, Ruth serves her life sentence in state prison. Her husband, left alone to grieve the loss of his only child, continues to speak about awareness and the importance of intervention before tragedy. Matthew's name now represents more than loss. It's a call to act when something feels wrong, to speak when silence could cost a life. Because in the end, the story isn't just about how Matthew died, it's about how he should have lived. He should have woken up that morning, eaten breakfast, gone to school, and come home to his parents. He should have grown into the man his father believed he would become. But one night, despair took that from him, and the only person who could have saved him became the one who didn't. May his memory remind every parent, neighbor, and friend that love cannot protect what despair is allowed to destroy. Case 4, Lisa Snyder, Berks County, crime 2019, sentence 2024. It was the evening of September 23, 2019, when first responders arrived at a quiet home in Albany Township, Berks County, Pennsylvania. Inside, the scene was almost unbearable. Two small children, Connor Snyder, just 8 years old, and his 4-year-old sister, Brinley, were found hanging in the basement by a dog leash tied to a beam. Nearby, their mother, Lisa Snyder, stood emotionless, telling paramedics that her son did it himself and that his sister had followed because she didn't want to be alone. What began as a tragedy of a parent-child suicide quickly unraveled into one of Pennsylvania's most haunting cases of maternal homicide. Lisa Snyder's story shifted over the following hours and days. She told police that Connor had been bullied at school and was suicidal. She claimed he had spoken about wanting to die and had taken Brinley with him. But investigators found the story impossible to believe. The logistics alone were damning. A small boy could not have reached the beam, tied the knot, or lifted his sister high enough to complete the act. There was no physical evidence that he could have constructed the hanging mechanism, and no child psychologist who reviewed the case found his mother's claims credible. What the evidence revealed instead was a meticulously staged crime scene and a mother attempting to disguise murder as a double suicide. When forensic teams processed the home, they discovered disturbing online searches made on Lisa Snyder's phone. Hanging yourself, carbon monoxide poisoning, and How long does it take to die? She had also searched for, does a weight bench hold body weight? And what happens if someone finds a body after hanging? Investigators learned that just days before the killings, Snyder had told a friend she was tired of being a single mother and couldn't handle her children anymore. It was a chilling foreshadowing of what was to come. As the investigation deepened, prosecutors revealed that Snyder had also been in contact with an online stranger through Facebook, exchanging sexually explicit messages about suicide and death fantasies. When the crime occurred, she used the very dog leash that had once been tied to the family's dog to suspend her children from a wooden beam. The brutality was not impulsive. It was calculated. According to prosecutors, she planned it, executed it, and then stood by while her children's lives slipped away. Lisa Snyder was arrested in December 2019, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and endangering the welfare of children. She was denied bail and held at the Berks County Jail as prosecutors prepared a capital case. Through years of delay, Snyder maintained her innocence, but the evidence mounted: digital searches, physical reconstruction, psychological assessments, and her own contradictions. By March 2024, after nearly 5 years of hearings, Snyder chose to plead guilty rather than face the death penalty. In an emotional sentencing, Judge Paul M. Yatron handed down 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Snyder sat silent as the court described her children's final moments and her complete lack of remorse. The judge called her actions pure evil, stating, "You robbed them of life, of love, and of a future, and then tried to blame an innocent child for your own cruelty." The case of Lisa Snyder left Berks County shaken. Connor was remembered by his school as a bright, playful boy who loved building things, and Brinley was described as his shadow, always smiling, always following her big brother. The community held vigils, releasing hundreds of blue and pink balloons in their memory. Teachers, neighbors, and friends gathered at the elementary school playground to lay flowers and toys beneath the swings where the siblings had once played. From a psychological perspective, experts describe Snyder's crime as an example of malignant maternal narcissism, a condition where a parent views their children not as individuals, but as extensions of themselves. When life becomes overwhelming, these parents sometimes destroy what they can no longer control. Unlike psychotic filicide, which stems from delusion, this act was rooted in anger, resentment, and the desire to escape responsibility without facing judgment. For child advocates, the Snyder case reignited debates about mental health screening for parents under severe stress and the need for intervention when signs of emotional collapse appear. Lisa had reportedly told a friend weeks before the murders that she felt done, yet no one took those words as a warning. The tragedy has since become a case study in recognizing and responding to behavioral red flags, because too often those signs only make sense after the fact. Today, Lisa Snyder lives out her life sentence inside a Pennsylvania state prison, never to see freedom again. Her name is remembered not for remorse, but for the unimaginable betrayal of 2 children who loved her without condition. Connor and Brinley's story reminds every viewer that evil does not always appear as a stranger. It sometimes lives inside the home, behind closed doors, disguised as love. Their lives ended together, but in their memory lives a single truth: no child should ever fear the person meant to keep them safe. Case 5, Shyre, Richardson, Dauphin County. Crime 2020, charged 2020. It was just before dawn on October 27, 2020, when a 911 call came from a small home in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The caller, a shaken, tearful mother, reported that her baby wasn't breathing. When first responders arrived, they found an infant boy, just a few months old, lying lifeless beside his mother in bed. That woman was 32-year-old Shyre Richardson. She told paramedics she had fallen asleep while nursing her son, only to wake hours later to find him unresponsive. It sounded like a tragic accident until the investigation revealed it was anything but. The Dauphin County coroner determined the cause of death to be asphyxia, a preventable suffocation caused by co-sleeping in unsafe conditions. What made this case different was Richardson's history. Child and Youth Services, CYS, had already warned her on multiple occasions about the dangers of sleeping with her baby while intoxicated. They had documented previous visits, offered parenting support, and even provided educational materials about infant sleep safety. Yet, on the night of her son's death, investigators found open alcohol containers in the room and a blood alcohol level far above the legal limit. According to the Dauphin County District Attorney's Office, Richardson admitted she had been drinking heavily that evening. She said she didn't think it would hurt to bring her baby into bed just for a little while, but her statement contradicted what CYS had recorded in earlier visits. She'd been told repeatedly that it was dangerous. Those prior warnings elevated the case from a tragedy to a criminal act. Prosecutors charged her in December 2020 with involuntary manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and endangering the welfare of a child. In court filings, the prosecution emphasized that this was not about a mother's fatigue. It was about negligence with knowledge. She knew the risks, had been told the consequences, and still chose to ignore them. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Gettle described the case as a failure to act responsibly when every warning had been given. The baby's father, devastated and angry, told reporters that what hurt most was that their child's death was avoidable in every way. Forensic pathologists testified that the infant likely suffocated as he became trapped between his mother's body and the bedding, unable to breathe. The medical examiner confirmed there were no signs of trauma, just a slow, silent death that could have been prevented with a crib or bassinet. During her plea hearing, Richardson wept openly, telling the court she never intended to harm her child. "I just wanted to be close to him," she said. "I didn't think this would happen again." Her words, again, referred to a prior non-fatal co-sleeping incident in which the same child had briefly stopped breathing months earlier, a case that had already prompted CYS intervention. The judge paused, visibly shaken, before saying, "This court cannot overlook the fact that you were warned, yet you chose to risk your son's life again." Richardson was sentenced to 3 to 6 years in state prison, followed by probation and mandatory substance abuse treatment. In delivering the sentence, the judge made clear that this was not about vengeance, but accountability. "You had the power to protect him," he said, "and you didn't." The case of Shyre Richardson is one that blurs the line between tragedy and crime. Experts in infant safety point out that co-sleeping deaths often happen in loving homes to caring parents who underestimate the risk. But what makes this case stand out is the pattern of warnings ignored. Psychologists call it risk normalization, when repeated exposure to danger makes it feel safe. Each night, she brought that baby into bed, and the fear faded a little more, until it was gone completely. In the aftermath, the Dauphin County District Attorney's Office used the case to launch new public awareness campaigns about safe sleep practices and the dangers of intoxicated caregiving. Pediatricians across Pennsylvania echoed the same message: never co-sleep after drinking, and never assume tragedy won't happen just this once. The baby's name has not been released publicly, but his story has already saved lives. Hospitals and child welfare agencies now use the Richardson case in educational training sessions, showing new parents how quickly love and care can turn fatal when mixed with neglect and alcohol. His death was quiet, but its message is loud. Warnings exist for a reason. No child should die because a parent refuses to listen. Case 6, Emily Weaver, Lancaster County, charged 2023. The summer heat in Lancaster County had already reached its peak on August 17, 2023, when a call came through to 911 about a baby left alone in a parked car outside a townhouse complex on Old Philadelphia Pike. When officers arrived, the temperature inside the vehicle was estimated to be well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In the back seat, secured in a car seat, lay a 3-month-old baby girl, unresponsive and drenched in sweat. Her tiny body was warm to the touch, her lips blue, and her breathing gone. It was too late. Paramedics rushed her to a nearby hospital, but doctors could only confirm what the heat had already done. That infant's mother, Emily Weaver, was found inside a nearby apartment, high on methamphetamine. The initial investigation unfolded quickly. Witnesses told police they saw Weaver leave her car around 11 a.m., locking it and heading into a friend's apartment. Hours passed before anyone realized there was a baby inside. When officers questioned Weaver, her story shifted. First, she claimed she had only been gone a few minutes, then maybe an hour. But phone records and witness statements revealed that she had been inside the apartment for nearly 3 hours, using meth and passing out while her daughter was slowly suffocating in the sweltering vehicle. When detectives asked Weaver why she left the baby in the car, she claimed she didn't want to wake her up and believed she'd only be inside for a moment. Toxicology reports later confirmed methamphetamine in her system at the time of arrest. Prosecutors charged her with third-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and endangering the welfare of a child. The district attorney's office described the case as one of callous disregard, a perfect storm of addiction, recklessness, and maternal failure. As the case developed, investigators painted a picture of a young woman spiraling deep into substance abuse and self-neglect. Weaver, only 27 years old, had been in and out of treatment programs for methamphetamine addiction. Court records showed prior arrests related to drug possession and child endangerment. Family members told reporters they had tried to help her, warning social services about her instability, but nothing changed. She was described as a loving mother when sober, but lost when high. On that day in August, the addiction won. The autopsy confirmed what experts already knew. The baby died of hyperthermia. In a sealed vehicle under direct sunlight, temperatures can climb by nearly 20 degrees every 10 minutes. Within an hour, it becomes a lethal trap. The child's car seat straps left faint imprints on her skin, marks that told investigators how long she had struggled before losing consciousness. The baby's death was neither fast nor painless. When the case reached court later that year, Weaver appeared pale, shaking, and silent. Her defense attorney argued she suffered from severe substance use disorder and postpartum depression, that her mind was clouded and irrational. The prosecution countered that she made repeated conscious decisions to use meth, to lock the doors, to walk away, and that her actions directly caused her daughter's death. The judge called it an act of reckless indifference. Weaver was denied bail and has remained in custody since. Experts in forensic psychology often point to cases like this as the embodiment of addiction-driven filicide, where a parent's impaired cognition destroys their ability to perceive danger. Addiction, they say, doesn't erase responsibility. It simply exposes how far a person can fall when dependency replaces empathy. Methamphetamine, in particular, causes extreme impulsivity, distorted judgment, and emotional numbness. It creates a tunnel vision where the next high becomes more urgent than everything else, even a crying child in the back seat. In Lancaster County, the case ignited conversations about parental addiction, postpartum recovery, and accountability. Neighbors set up a memorial near the parking lot, a small white cross, pink flowers, and a stuffed giraffe resting beneath the sign that read, "In loving memory." One local pastor told reporters, "We can't keep pretending these are isolated incidents. When addiction wins, children lose every time." As of early 2024, Emily Weaver remains in county custody, awaiting trial, facing up to 40 years in prison if convicted. Her case will likely be cited by prosecutors and social workers alike as an example of how untreated addiction and postpartum crisis can intersect to catastrophic effect. The baby's name has not been released publicly, but her short life has already changed something in her community. Her story is being used in local awareness campaigns, urging parents to seek help for addiction and mental health before tragedy strikes. In the end, this is not just the story of a young woman's failure. It's a portrait of how addiction can strip away humanity one choice at a time. A child's life ended because her mother's mind was too clouded to see what love requires: presence, protection, and awareness. And if there is one lesson to take from this story, it is this: addiction doesn't just destroy the addict, it reaches into cribs, into back seats, into every quiet space where a child depends on love to survive. Case 7. Tara Brazzle, Lancaster County, cold case solved 2023. In the quiet countryside of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the year 2007 brought one of the most heartbreaking mysteries the community had ever faced. On a cold December morning, sanitation workers discovered a plastic bag in a rural field off White Oak Road in Penn Township. Inside was the body of a newborn baby girl, her umbilical cord still attached, her tiny face pale and still. Investigators named her Baby Mary Ann, a name chosen so she would be remembered as a person, not as evidence. For more than 15 years, police kept her photograph in their offices and her DNA stored in state databases, waiting for the day someone could finally tell her story. For years, no one came forward. Detectives followed every lead: DNA testing, community canvassing, hospital records, but the mother's identity remained a mystery. The baby had been born alive. The autopsy confirmed air in her lungs, proving she took at least one breath before dying. There was no sign of illness or external injury, only exposure. Someone had left her outside in freezing winter air, alone, within hours of her birth. Her death was ruled homicide by neglect. In 2023, technology finally caught up to the questions the community had never stopped asking. Genetic genealogy, the same science that had cracked hundreds of cold cases across the country, provided the breakthrough. DNA specialists from the Lancaster County Coroner's Office and Parabon Nanolabs used advanced familial DNA tracing to build a genetic family tree. Through distant relatives and ancestry databases, they traced the match back to a woman living in nearby Ephrata, 44-year-old Tara Brazzle. When police arrived at her home in February 2023, Brazzle appeared stunned. After hours of questioning, she finally admitted that she had given birth in secret in 2007, alone in her bathroom. She said the baby wasn't breathing, but investigators believe she made no attempt to call for help or seek medical care. Instead, she wrapped the newborn in a towel, placed her in a plastic bag, and drove to the field under the cover of night. There, she left her baby to die in the cold. The weight of that choice lingered for 16 years before science brought her back to accountability. Prosecutors charged Tara Brazzle with third-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and concealment of the death of a child. She pled guilty later that year, expressing remorse through tears but offering little explanation. The judge described the crime as a mother's decision that erased a life before it began. Brazzle was sentenced to a term of 9 to 20 years in state prison in late 2023, closing a case that had haunted investigators for nearly 2 decades. Detectives who worked the case said they had kept Baby Mary Ann's file on their desks all those years, refusing to give up. One officer told reporters, "We never wanted her to be forgotten. She was someone's daughter, even if that someone tried to pretend she didn't exist." The coroner, who attended the 2007 scene, said the moment Brazzle's name was confirmed was like hearing the baby's cry for the first time. We finally knew who she belonged to. From a psychological standpoint, experts describe Brazzle's behavior as part of neonaticide, a term for the killing of a newborn within 24 hours of birth. It often occurs in secret pregnancies concealed out of fear, shame, or panic. These acts are rarely premeditated in the conventional sense, but emerge from denial and emotional breakdown. In interviews with forensic psychologists, Brazzle described feeling numb and terrified of being judged. Still, the court emphasized that fear does not excuse abandonment. She had access to hospitals, to safe haven laws, to help, but she chose silence. The story of baby Mary Ann is a tragic testament to how easily preventable some deaths truly are. Pennsylvania's safe haven law, in place since 2002, allows any parent to surrender an unharmed newborn at a hospital or police station, no questions asked. Had Tara known, or had she trusted someone enough to tell the truth, her daughter might have lived. When Lancaster County officials finally laid baby Mary Ann to rest, they did so with flowers and a small plaque engraved with her name. Journalists covering the ceremony described the scene as quiet, peaceful, and long overdue. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder, many of them gray-haired now, remembering the baby they had promised not to forget. Today, Tara Brazzle serves her sentence, and the community that once called her child baby Mary Ann continues to keep her memory alive. Her grave has become a small symbol of hope, proof that time and technology can still deliver justice, even after years of silence. But it also stands as a warning that fear, shame, and secrecy can kill as surely as violence. This case is a haunting example of why awareness and compassion matter. No child should die because a mother feels trapped in fear. No parent should face desperation in isolation. For every baby Mary Ann, there are countless others still hidden, still unnamed, waiting for someone to choose courage over concealment. Case 8, Trinh Nguyen, Bucks County, crime 2022, sentence 2023. In the early hours of May 2nd, 2022, the quiet neighborhood of Upper Makefield Township, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, awoke to horror. Police were called to a brick townhouse on Timber Ridge Road after a frantic report that a woman had attempted to shoot her neighbor. When officers arrived, they discovered that inside that home, 2 young boys, Jeffrey, 13, and Nelson, 9, had been shot in their sleep. Both were unresponsive, still lying in their beds, surrounded by the faint smell of gunpowder and the evidence of a mother's final act of despair. Their mother, Trinh Nguyen, then 38, had already fled. She was found hours later at a nearby church parking lot, disoriented and clutching what police described as a suicide note. Next to her was a .38 caliber revolver, the same weapon used on her sons. She had attempted to shoot herself, but the gun jammed. What followed was a story of unraveling pressure, emotional collapse, and the quiet disintegration of a life that, from the outside, had seemed ordinary. Trinh Nguyen was a Vietnamese-American mother who had lived in Bucks County for several years. Friends described her as polite and private, a woman who loved her children deeply. But behind that calm exterior, her world had been collapsing. She was facing eviction, financial ruin, and the end of a long-term relationship. Court records revealed she was being forced out of the home owned by her ex-boyfriend's family. Her landlord was also the father of her children's half-brother. By the spring of 2022, she was unemployed, overwhelmed, and emotionally unstable. The night before the shootings, Nguyen packed her belongings into her minivan. At dawn, she entered her son's bedroom while they slept and fired a single bullet into each of their heads. The boys were later found still tucked under their blankets, their room undisturbed except for 2 small shell casings and a trail of blood leading to the hallway. She then drove to her neighbor's house where she handed over a box of photos and mementos, whispering, "Please give this to my ex's family." Moments later, she pulled out the gun and pulled the trigger, aiming at him. The gun misfired, giving him a chance to wrestle it away. Nguyen fled in her minivan, leaving behind a trail of heartbreak that would haunt Bucks County for years. Jeffrey and Nelson were rushed to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, but both were declared brain dead within 24 hours. Their organs were later donated, a final act of grace in a story defined by tragedy. At a vigil held in their memory, hundreds gathered with candles and tears, remembering the boys as gentle, kind, and inseparable. They were best friends, one teacher said. Wherever Jeffrey went, Nelson followed. Nguyen was arrested shortly after her failed suicide attempt. She was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and possession of an instrument of crime. During interrogation, she admitted to the shootings, saying she wanted to end their suffering and her own. Prosecutors called it a premeditated execution, rooted not in compassion but in control, the ultimate act of a parent who believed her children's lives belonged to her. At trial, in September 2023, Nguyen pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. The courtroom fell silent as she described, through tears, the moment she decided to take them with her. The judge, visibly shaken, told her, "You destroyed 2 innocent lives for reasons that will never make sense." Nguyen was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Psychologists analyzing the case later identified Nguyen's behavior as a form of altruistic filicide, a term used when a parent kills their children under the delusional belief that death will spare them from suffering. Experts cautioned that such cases are rarely spontaneous. They develop over weeks or months as hopelessness takes root. Nguyen's eviction, loss of stability, and isolation all contributed to a state of psychological collapse. But while her mental state may explain her reasoning, it does not justify it. For the Bucks County community, the tragedy was devastating. The Nguyen boys were remembered as bright and compassionate Jeffrey, the thoughtful older brother who loved robotics, and Nelson, the energetic little boy who wanted to be a firefighter. Their classmates painted murals in their honor, and local leaders launched mental health awareness programs to help parents facing crises before tragedy strikes. In her final court statement, Nguyen said softly, "I wanted peace for them. I thought I was giving them that." Her words, though haunting, only deepened the grief of those who knew the boys' joy, laughter, and light. The judge replied, "What you gave them was the end of everything they could have become." Today, Trinh Nguyen lives out her life sentence in a Pennsylvania state prison. The home on Timber Ridge Road stands quiet, its windows dark, its walls still echoing with memories of 2 boys who never made it to adulthood. Their names, Jeffrey and Nelson, now live on in scholarship funds and community vigils across Bucks County, symbols of innocence lost and the urgent need to recognize and treat parental despair before it turns deadly. Their story remains one of the most heartbreaking examples of how unchecked mental decline, isolation, and hopelessness can transform love into destruction. It is a reminder to every parent, every neighbor, and every community that help must come before the breaking point, because once that line is crossed, there is no undoing what's been done. Case 9, Angela Donmoyer and Russell Moore, Cumberland County, crime August 2021, charges filed August 2024. Parents charged with homicide and child endangerment after their 10-year-old daughter died from untreated chronic constipation in East Pennsboro Township. It was the middle of August 2021 when a 911 call came from a modest home in East Pennsboro Township, Cumberland County. Inside, first responders found the body of a 10-year-old girl lying in her bed. Her mother, Angela Donmoyer, and her boyfriend, Russell Moore, told police she had been sick for a while, but the truth was far worse. The autopsy would later reveal she had died slowly and painfully from pulmonary emboli caused by idiopathic megacolon, a chronic, severe constipation condition that had gone untreated for years. The child's death wasn't an accident. It was a direct result of neglect, a failure to act when every warning had been clear. According to Cumberland County court records, the girl hadn't seen a doctor in more than 7 years. Investigators found that her abdomen had become severely distended, a visible sign of the condition that would have been obvious to anyone caring for her daily. Medical experts testified that the child's suffering could have been prevented with simple medical care. The coroner called it one of the most preventable child deaths in the county's history. In interviews, Donmoyer admitted her daughter had stopped eating, vomited frequently, and complained of pain for weeks before her death. Still, neither she nor Moore ever sought medical help. The couple reportedly claimed they didn't want to cause trouble with doctors or child services. Detectives uncovered evidence that both adults understood the seriousness of her condition but continued to do nothing. That inaction became the foundation for the criminal homicide and endangering the welfare of a child charges filed against them in August 2024, 3 years to the day after the girl's death. Investigators who entered the home described disturbing conditions: overflowing trash, unwashed bedding, and signs that the child had been confined to her room for days. A forensic pediatrician later testified that her chronic constipation had led to extreme bowel dilation, eventually triggering fatal blood clots to her lungs. The medical term was idiopathic megacolon, but to prosecutors, it was simply a death by deliberate neglect. District Attorney Sean McCormick stated in a press briefing, "This child's suffering could have been ended by a single phone call. Instead, her mother and caregiver chose silence. They made the decision to let her die." That silence became the focus of the case, a theme of knowing inaction that prosecutors called lethal indifference. Both Angela Donmoyer and Russell Moore were arrested and held without bail. At their arraignment, they said little. Their attorney claimed they didn't understand how serious the condition was, but the evidence told a different story. School records, old medical forms, and family witness statements showed they had been told repeatedly to seek medical attention for her chronic constipation, but refused. Forensic psychologists call this kind of crime passive filicide through omission when a parent's apathy and avoidance become deadly. It's not rage or impulsive violence that kills, but a sustained refusal to act while a child's condition worsens. Psychologically, it stems from emotional withdrawal, denial, and an erosion of empathy, a gradual numbing of responsibility that ends in fatal neglect. The Cumberland County DA's office later stated, "This child endured years of suffering, and her death was not sudden. It was the result of a pattern of disregard that stripped her of dignity and life." The case has reignited questions about CYS oversight in Pennsylvania. Despite earlier reports of missed appointments and poor living conditions, there had been no intervention. Advocates argue this tragedy reveals how bureaucratic gaps can allow abuse and neglect to fester unseen. In the end, the story of this unnamed 10-year-old girl is not one of quick violence, but of a slow, invisible cruelty that kills just as surely. She didn't die in a moment of anger. She died over years of being ignored. Her suffering was quiet, but her death demands that no one ever mistake silence for innocence again. Her story stands as a final warning that doing nothing can be as deadly as any weapon, and that the greatest evil sometimes comes in the form of neglect disguised as love. Case 10, Ashley Caraballo, Lehigh County, crime 2019, charged 2020. It was a gray spring morning in Allentown, Pennsylvania, when police received a quiet, almost reluctant call about a possible infant death inside a small apartment on Turner Street. The date was May 2nd, 2019, and what officers found inside that apartment would become one of the most disturbing discoveries in Lehigh County's history. Hidden inside a paint can, sealed shut, was the body of a newborn baby girl. Tiny, fragile, wrapped in a trash bag, and left to decay under layers of drying paint. The child's mother, 21-year-old Ashley Caraballo, stood in the living room, shaking and silent. At first, Ashley told detectives she had suffered a miscarriage weeks earlier and didn't know what to do with the remains. But the autopsy told a different story. The baby was full term, had taken multiple breaths, and died only minutes after birth. The pathologist confirmed that the infant's lungs contained air, proving she had been alive. She had been born healthy and then hidden away. Investigators began to piece together Ashley's life in the months leading up to that day. Friends said she had worn baggy clothes, avoided photographs, and insisted she wasn't pregnant. She worked part-time at a local restaurant, never mentioning her condition to anyone, not even her family. When asked why she hid the pregnancy, Ashley later admitted she was terrified of judgment and overwhelmed by shame. She said she gave birth alone in her apartment bathroom, panicked, and believed the baby wasn't breathing. Instead of calling 911, she wrapped the newborn in a plastic bag, placed her inside an old paint can, sealed it with the lid, and hid it in the closet. She told no one. Police traced a series of Google searches on Ashley's phone that painted a chilling picture of intent. In the days before and after the birth, she searched for how to hide a pregnancy. How long does it take for a baby to die without air? And how to dispose of a body. These searches erased any doubt that this was accidental panic. It was a deliberate act of concealment. Detectives charged her with criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. Forensic psychologists who later studied the case described Ashley's state of mind as consistent with denial of pregnancy syndrome, a rare psychological condition in which a woman's mind refuses to acknowledge or accept her pregnancy until delivery or shortly before it. For some, the shock of sudden childbirth can trigger intense panic or dissociation, leading to irrational and catastrophic decisions. But while that may explain her emotional collapse, it does not excuse the crime. The court would later rule that Ashley had every opportunity to seek help to surrender her baby safely under Pennsylvania's safe haven law, which allows any parent to leave a newborn at a hospital or police station with no questions asked. In 2020, Ashley Caraballo entered a plea deal, pleading guilty to third-degree murder and abuse of a corpse to avoid a potential life sentence. During sentencing, she broke down in tears, saying she lived every day haunted by what she had done. The judge, while acknowledging her remorse, reminded her that remorse comes too late when a life has already been taken. He sentenced her to 15 to 30 years in state prison, describing her actions as a tragedy of fear turned into destruction. The community's reaction was quiet, sorrowful, and angry all at once. Many couldn't comprehend how a young woman could hide an entire pregnancy from family, friends, and the world. Others pointed to the lack of mental health outreach for young mothers, especially those battling depression, trauma, and isolation. Outside the courthouse, women's advocacy groups placed a small pink memorial at the steps. A baby blanket, a pacifier, and a note that read, "She never had a name, but she mattered." From a psychological lens, Ashley's case sits at the intersection of maternal denial, fear, and fatal inaction. Experts describe it as a perfect storm of panic and secrecy, a mother's mind trapped between shame and survival instinct. Instead of seeking help, she chose silence, and silence, in this story, was deadly. In the years since, Ashley's case has been cited in Pennsylvania as a sobering example of the need for public awareness about safe haven laws and mental health access for expectant mothers in crisis. It reminds us that while fear can feel consuming, help exists, and that the consequences of hiding the truth are irreversible. Some crimes are shocking because of their brutality. Others, like this one, devastate because of their quietness. No screaming, no struggle, just a young woman, a secret, and a baby who never got the chance to live. The paint can in that closet wasn't just a container. It was the silence of a community that didn't see her pain, and the final resting place of a life lost to fear. Not every mother in these stories acted out of pure cruelty. Some were driven by neglect, fear, addiction, or emotional collapse, but the result was the same: a child's life lost when help could have made the difference. These tragedies remind us that evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hides in silence, inaction, and denial. Each story is a call to notice the signs, to speak up, and to care enough to intervene before it's too late. Share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more true stories told with honesty and respect, and help make awareness louder than silence, so no child is ever forgotten.